Next, I believe that we have a presentation. Peter Elder from the Historic Preservation Committee would like to present to us some information here and a proposal about creating a historic district in the village.
I have some copies. These are the hard copies that I emailed you earlier. You did? Well, then you don't need them. These are, you want afterwards? There you go.
Sorry.
That's all right. I wanted to make sure. All right, well, thank you for having me tonight. I wanted to just come to you. We've been talking at Historic Preservation the last 2 or 3 months about the possible establishment of an historic district in the village. I know this can sound scary to some people, so that's why I wanted to go over it tonight and talk to you about it. And so there's actually a number of steps involved. And the first one I just want to point out to you is really very innocuous, and that's an historic survey of properties. It is actually on the front page that I sent to you under actions. It talks about assess eligibility. And that's really what this begins to do, is assess the eligibility by having an historic property survey in the village. And we had some great discussions with Megan Clem about this. She did not want to go on record in the document, but gave us the indication that based on our housing stock, we certainly do probably meet the criteria for having this kind of historic survey. But obviously that would be the first step in the process. I guess just to kind of go forward, you guys can all read this. I'm not going to have to read it to you, but I would go through if I could just look at number 5 on the second page, where it talks about pros and myths. There's a few things that are really important to point out about the establishment of a historic district. The first is that it does assist in historically preserving our heritage here in the village. We do have a lot of significantly older homes and housing stock. There's also some economic benefits because it does have an effect on property values and also promotes tourism. And to give you an idea of this, many of you know I'm a member of the chair of the trustees, actually, the Webster Baptist Church. That is an extraordinarily old structure, and we will get probably once every year requests for people to come in and actually tour the church based on its cobblestone design. So you can see what happens is these people are coming here, they spend a couple hours, and then invariably, what do? They go and eat somewhere. So they might go to the cobblestone, or they might go to, Barry's they used to go to, but they might go to Mary Wee's now. So there's kind of this cross-fertilization that occurs with historic structures as well. But the biggest thing to keep in mind is the tax incentives that can have for property owners within the district. They get a 20% tax incentive when they do improvements, and those improvements are very broad. They can go from exterior changes to a home improvements to even interior changes like kitchens. So that is a huge part of what the benefit is. It also gives you better access to grant opportunities because you become a certified community, and so those grant opportunities are greater, the chances of getting them awarded is greater. There are some myths that I'd like to dispel really quickly about historic districts. The first is, are there any regulatory restrictions that are added onto the property owner? The answer is no. The only regulatory restriction is the zoning that's there now. It doesn't add anything to it. It doesn't change local zoning. And will it cost more for someone to work on their home or business? Actually, no. It actually is something that it doesn't affect that at all. And does it allow another layer of government to tell people what to do with their properties? And again, the answer is no. Perhaps 20 years ago, but there's significant differences when we talked about this then, and it does not work like that now. It's just a designation of an area that has historic significance within a particular municipality, and the village is perfect for this because we do have a lot of old housing stock. And you can see the federal rehabilitation tax credit is 20% for rehabilitation of historic owner-occupied residential property, and New York State also has a 20% tax credit for up to $50,000. So there is a distinct benefit to property owners for being in an historic district. And I know a lot of you here, Daryl and I definitely know this. We live in historic homes. Judy had an historic home. Carl has one. They do take a little upkeep, right? I mean, so that's actually valuable. You know, it's not uncommon for something really odd to occur because you're in a 150-year-old structure. So, and anyway, so that's really, those first 2 pages really give you kind of an overview of what we're talking about here. And then The next set of documents is basically a draft document that goes through what the plan would look like if there was a proposal for a historic resource survey, and then kind of a draft timeline. We based this on, when we talked to her in 2025 in September, we based this on what we just talked to her in 2024. So some of these dates are approximate, but there's certainly possible ways of looking at this. It's not a short process. It's going to take time to do the property survey, and then time for the public input, and then time again for public hearings and those kind of things as well. And actually time to define the boundaries of the district. That is really the whole thing. I think what we'd be asking for the village board to do is give us a general blessing that we can move forward. As far as cost goes, the cost of the historic survey can be very much offset by grants. The first most important grant is a 501c, is because the village is a municipality. I would recommend the village apply for it, rather than say, they have in here the museum could do it, but I think it really is a village project. It's a Preserve New York grant, and that covers 80% of the cost. If that wasn't good enough, you can close that gap further by applying for additional grants of the 20%. There are some municipalities that pay nothing because the entire cost is paid for through grants for this historic survey. So I guess that is sort of the overview of it in a kind of a nutshell. I think it's an exciting opportunity for the village to get itself into a place where it can say it has a district that encompasses historic homes. Again, not to in any way restrict the homeowners in that district, but rather to highlight the homes in that district, because those of us who do have historic homes, as anyone who doesn't, but everyone does, but particularly ones with historic homes, we kind of have a great pride in that. They are a lot of work, but they're beautiful, and so this is a great way to help keep that up. And again, it brings in some opportunities for us to do tours, to talk more about what we have here in historic research in the village. Anybody have any questions that I could help answer? If you think of any, just email me anytime.
I have one. Did we have a survey done, or did we have something done a while ago that was designated historic homes?
There was a survey done. It was done in like the 1980s and 90s. It's quite old. And that survey was not actually an historic resource survey, believe it or not. It didn't cover all of the actual properties that would qualify under this kind of plan. So I think it was done in a different way. It wasn't done with the notion that it was going to be an historic district. It was done with the notion of just simply surveying individual homes. These types of surveys are more, at least according to Megan, are a lot more in depth. They tend to look at a house differently. They tend to look at architectural style differently. So you're going to get a different and better result off of this than what you saw then. Plus, it's 30 years later, so, and things have changed.
One of the things that you mentioned in here, my question is, if you're doing this in terms of property value, it increases property value, if that increase then, would that increase the property tax on that home? And would that assess value?
I'm not saying, I can't say that wouldn't happen. I mean, I think if it adds value to your home, it could possibly add to how your home is taxed. But of course, the one occurs before the other. First, you're going to receive the value, then you're going to get taxed on it. So I would say that can't guarantee that wouldn't happen. I mean, but obviously, if it has an effect on the value, it's going to have a positive effect on the value. So you'll be able to sell your home for more. So the person coming in, they're the ones that would probably have to pay a little more taxes, right? So
I'm just wondering how this might dovetail with the town doing their
Well,
reassessment.
Well, if the town's reassessment schedule is, as I understand it, we would not be able to implement this prior to the time that reevaluation occurs. It would be hard to do. It takes time to do this.
The village, it'll be 2028.
Well, it might be around the same time then. So yeah. Talking 2 years, I think, to get this done. It's not a horribly expensive project, so when if you're thinking like it's going to be $1 million, it's not. She was talking in the couple tens of thousands, which is why it can be covered by grants. So.
Right. Who would be the lead in applying for the Preserve New York grant and any others?
Well, she indicated that we would be the leads initially in the application process, but the Landmark Society is if we utilize them. They are very welcoming in terms of helping us apply for it so that we have the best chance of success. So I guess the lead would end up being the Historic Preservation Commission, and at least initially, in terms of the application, when the grant's awarded, it's going to be awarded to the village. So I don't think the five of us could actually handle that particular responsibility. But we certainly would lead the effort to get this going.
Matt, you want to help us with one more grant?
How soon could Megan start?
Well, I mean, I think it's a matter of whether or not the board is relatively in support of the start. And the other thing is, one thing doesn't necessarily lead to the other. Just because we get the historic property survey, if for some reason it short circuits and doesn't go all the way to the historic district, we still have that survey to do an inventory of our homes in the village and our businesses. So it does have value just in that alone, that we have a document that's current, updated, and much more complete than what we had before to work with. But I do think it would be good to have public forums and hearings to determine whether or not people are okay with this. Because it really is a benefit without having any penalty at all. They've really done a great job at not penalizing homeowners for having a historic home. Just the opposite, in fact. So, yeah.
But I think in the documents, Megan suggested starting in the fall on the assumption that the village is going to apply for the grant.
Right.
The grant would be due in the beginning of March or something like
Yes.
that. You must hear sometime over the summer whether you get it.
Right.
If you just want to pay 18 grand up front out of the village's own money, she'll probably start tomorrow.
Yeah.
She only wants 20% down, and then 60% of the project completion, she's asking for more.
Right.
It would buy us a little time,
Right.
you know what I mean?
And
It's
we
not
would-
like you have to give it all to her now.
Right.
It's 20%, she has $3,700 down.
Exactly.
And I think the village should apply for the grant. I think it has a lot to say for us if we can get that grant approved.
Yeah.
So even if the village up front of the 4,000, I still think the village should be looking at that grant opportunity because that'll help us hone even more, I think, in terms of how we look at this whole process. So, well, I know you've heard some things probably here and there about this, and I said everything today. If you want to kind of let this marinate for a couple of weeks, you let me come back and I will get a sense of what you want, see if I can figure out a motion or a way for us to move forward with your blessing. We'll do that. I suspect at the moment, if you would let us just kind of give us a sense that it's okay, and then let us work on the grant, that's probably what we'd start doing. But again, how about I'll come back to the first meeting in January, and then we'll talk about it again and see where you're at. Does that sound good?
Peter, will you help us write the grant? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the three of us, there's probably 3 or 4 of us on that group that we can do this together to make this happen. So I think we can write the grant, especially with the Landmark Society's input, I think that's definitely possible. This is not the most complex grant by any stretch.
Good.
It's not the New York State 4 grant. So.
There you go.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.